topic tonight, and we've been talking about kind of the how the Southern Baptists split from the Northern Baptists or the American Baptists, and we're going to continue that. But we've been leading up into the Civil War, okay, and we've been talking about a few people and a few ideas and some of the things that happened between the North and the South that caused the Southern Baptist Convention to form in 1845. Now, we know that the Civil War starts in 1861 and goes through 1865. And so we're going to look at what happened after. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because there wasn't a lot going on during the Civil War as far as mission work and those kind of things, and ideas that were going around in theology. It was just, there was, a difference between federal rights and state rights, and a difference in how things should be handled, and it led to a civil war that lasted 4 years, and Baptists were fighting against Baptists, much like everything else. You had brother against brother and those sort of things. But we're not going to spend any time during the Civil War, but we're going to look at some of the things that happened after. So we're going to start with the effect of the Civil War on Baptists, is what we're going to look at. So, because there's always an aftermath, right? We always talk about, like, if you sat through American history in high school or college, you're always going to hit the Civil War. But I'm not sure how much time we spend on what happened after the Civil War. That these are the dates. This is when Gettysburg was signed. This is when Gettysburg happened. This is the Emancipation Proclamation. Those sorts of things. But I don't know if we spend a lot of time with after. So we're going to look at what happened after the Civil War and what it did to Baptists. So in the South, the Civil War produced economic and political distress. It also produced spiritual decline, and it produced inflation. So you can probably think, yeah, those are things that are going to happen after a war, right? Because one of the things that the North did to kind of cripple the South was, take away their currency. So what does that cause? You drop currency, it causes inflation, right? So you can see that after the Civil War, there's going to be some economic, political distress. There's going to be spiritual decline because, you had Christians killing Christians. You had believers killing believers. War is never good. When I was in ROTC in high school, our commander, I don't remember his rank, but the guy that taught the program, he said, one of the first things he said was, nobody ever wins a war, right? Everybody loses when it comes to war. And so you can see that these things would happen in time of war and after. And so it's going to have an effect on Baptists. So this hindered and almost destroyed mission work in and from the South, because they don't have money anymore. Their currency has been taken away, devalued, drives up inflation. People are very poor. We even today generally think of the South as more poor than the North, right? That comes from Civil War and that time. And so mission work was almost brought to a halt. Many missionaries, both north and south, had to abandon their mission work in the border states. You can see that would happen. Okay, you're in a border state between north and south. That's where the fighting is going on. You've started a mission work, a church planted. Things come through, towns get burned, all of these things. So a lot of them had to abandon and leave. Indian missions were cut off from supplies once the Union Army captured the Mississippi River. Okay, so once they were able to seal the South in, the churches that were supporting Indian missions in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, that side of the Mississippi River, all of that got shut down. And so they couldn't do mission work. They couldn't send supplies and money, whatever they had, across the Mississippi because now the Union Army had taken control of all of that. So missions to the cities lost their leaders who fled to fight in the war. So churches that had pastors in the cities, people that were doing mission work in cities, they left to go fight in the war. And as we know, many of them did not come home. They didn't come back because Civil War was brutal. So we can see that on missions and on spreading the gospel, the Civil War had devastating effects, especially in the South. And who had been crippled economically, crippled spiritually, and there's rampant inflation, so they're having a hard time even living.
And you might just add in there, both sides thought they were on God's side. Both sides.
Yes, but one of them had the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and the other one was just Whistling Dixie. So, I mean, you can determine who it was. No, you're right. You're right. They both did believe that God was on their side. And a lot of what I didn't tell you is in the South, what really helped them a lot was the pastors, because mission work had been cut off. They thought of mission work was to the soldiers during that time. And so they were holding chapel services during, right before battles and all of that. I know when you watch like movies about that time, you have the good guys in blue and the bad guys, they're evil and they're wearing gray. That's where American history has gone, because victors write history, right? But there was a lot, yes, both sides believed in God. They believed that God was on their side.
Like I said, Robert E. Lee had great prayers.
Oh, yeah.
He was some of the things that we quote now that we would think that would be coming from the winner's side actually came from him. And Stonewall Jackson actually was the leader or the doctor of theology at Virginia Military Institute. He was a pastor.
Yeah, and I mean the great godly men, both of them. It's too bad we don't teach the real history
It really is, because there was I think it would change our outlook on how things developed after the war.
Yes. Yeah.
And Lincoln had a plan from the politics. You already talked about the economics and all that. But had Lincoln been able to impose his plan,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he could have, even with Grant there, because there was a lot of hatred involved with the political leaders at the time. But it was a more forgiving plan. His restitution plan was much nicer than what was going to end up.
Yeah. I've when you look at the politics and the things that some of those guys did, especially after, you can go, I don't know. I don't know if that was the right decision. But anyway, we'll continue on with Baptists. I know we're in your wheelhouse right now. Just, it's fine. Your input is most appreciated. All right, so the effect of the Civil War on the Baptists. However, in the South, the desire for missions did not disappear. So Baptists wanted to continue to do mission work. The Home Mission Board at the time was able to collect money from Kentucky, whose currency was still intact. So Kentucky wasn't as affected as other southern states monetarily. So the Home Mission Board brought in some money from Kentucky, and this inspired churches from Missouri and Maryland to give to the Home Mission Board. So these states, you know that Missouri is was kind of a checkerboard state, and Maryland still in the north, but still participated a lot in the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay, so what that does is that so when they bring this money in, what it did is it allowed for 124 workers to be sent to the blacks and to the Indian territories in 1866. So the desire for missions, the Home Mission Board, still intact, the Southern Baptist Convention, still intact, although hurt, crippled by the Civil War, their desire to serve Christ and to promote mission work was still a part of Southern Baptist life. And they were able to pull this money together to provide workers to send out into these territories. So, the Northern Baptists saw the South as impoverished states, and began to fund work in the South. So there starts to be a cooperation between the northern states and the southern states as Baptists, okay? Between the Baptists who are wanting to, especially in the north, they feel that that there needs to be mission work done to the African American populations that had just been released from slavery. So they start to fund mission work in the South. So the American Baptist Home Mission Society, the American Baptist Publishing Society, and the American and Foreign Mission Society all carried out mission work in the South. We talked about those a few weeks ago, those societies that were formed. So they start to do mission work in the South and start to fund some churches and some things. And the northern agencies started lending money to southern churches and conventions on the condition that the monies collected from the recipients would go back to the northern agencies. Sound a little shady? Yeah, so here's what's happening. We're going to lend you money, we're going to give it to you, but when you start collecting money to give to missions, to publications, it's going to come back to us. It's going to come back north. So the Northern Baptists, who have always been upset since 1845 that the Southern Baptists formed a convention instead of societies, are starting to go into the Southern churches, into the South, who has been crippled economically, start lending money on the idea that once they do that and these churches become established, these missions become established, that the monies that they start to put towards mission and towards publications and towards those things will go into the Northern Baptist pocket. Okay, so you're going to buy these publications. You're going to do this. So this was some of the agreements that were set up. Southern Baptist leaders started to develop the view that these works in the South would threaten the Southern Baptist Convention. So they start to go, wait a second, this isn't good for Southern Baptists. We split for a reason. Now, as I told you a couple of weeks ago, the straw that broke the camel's back was slavery. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was always money. Okay? That's the issue every time. It all comes back to money. What was happening, if you remember, is the Northern Baptists had all these separate societies. And the South said, we can probably bring all of those things together under one convention. And there would be an umbrella. The Northern Baptists said, that's going to take away from church autonomy. Okay? The South said, we want to have all of our business, all of our thing done at one time, rather than have to go to all of these separate society meetings that are done throughout the year and are mostly held up north. And it costs us 2, 3, 4 times as much to do these conventions, to do these meetings, than it does the Northern. So if we can do it all under one umbrella, then it's going to be a whole lot cheaper on us, and we can use that money to do more work. That's why the split happened in 1845. Was there some other things? Yes, but the main issue is, and always is, money. Okay, so Southern Baptists start to go, wait, this influx of money into the South is destroying the convention, because these churches are now becoming loyal and paying their dues back to the North, which you can probably think is not going to be even politically, because what just happened? They went through a war fighting these guys. So there's going to be that separation. There was, even after the Civil War, even after the the peace agreements, the forgiveness of the South, the bringing them into the Union, and it all becoming one United States, there was still this animosity between guys that were shooting at each other, right? So you can see that this probably is going to cause some division. So discussions began to center around the two groups realigning under one form of leadership. They're starting to say, well, we need to bring these together. And in 1868, the American Baptist Home Mission Society sent a committee to the Southern Baptist Convention with an invitation of fraternal order and an offer of financial assistance. Meaning, we want you to disband the Southern Baptist Convention. So the home mission says, we're going to help you finance, we're going to help you rebuild, we're going to help you do these things, but we want the Southern Baptist Convention to end. The offer was rejected. So the Southern Baptists said, no, we don't want that. We want to continue functioning under a convention. So in 1870, Southern Baptist Convention leadership offered a resolution that stated, any attempt to secure, sorry, I typed that in twice, organic relations between the boards, North and South, would tend rather to keep up strife among the brethren. So that was in their resolution, that if we do this thing, if we come into an order together, it's going to create more strife between Baptists, was their stance on it. So it's going to cause infighting, and those issues of why they split in the first place, not because of slavery, but because of where money was allocated, are still going to be the issues. So this resolution called for each section to do its own work while maintaining cooperative relationships. So we're still going to work with the North because they're all still under the umbrella of Baptists. Okay? I tend to think that I sometimes, because I used to think this way, that we would say we are a Southern Baptist church, but we're not. We're a church, a Baptist church that participates in the Southern Baptist Convention because we're autonomous. There's nothing over us. The Southern Baptist Convention has no say in what happens in this church, but we have a say in what happens in the convention, okay, because we join together. So Hillside Baptist Church isn't a Southern Baptist church, it's a Southern Baptist affiliate, right? Much like if we were to go down the road, there's a church down there that is a Nazarene church. They're not a Nazarene affiliate. They are run by the Nazarene organization, okay? We're not. We're autonomous. So that's what's happening, okay? Is there are both Baptists. They both support Baptist cause. They still believe the same things, that baptism is done by a believer, which is why they're Baptists. Okay? That church autonomy is important. Freedom of religion is important. Both groups still believe those core values. And so they can work together to promote the same ideas. How they do that is what they differ on. One says, nope, we want churches to be completely autonomous. There is no governing board, and we believe that convention style puts a governing board over churches. But that's not how conventions work, right? That's not how the Southern Baptist Convention works, okay? And they're saying, no, we want to use our money to go into the South and to build up Southern Baptist churches, and which is going to be kind of the problem. So as the Southern Baptists began to separate in organization from the Northern Baptists, they were accused of becoming more territorial. So they're drawing lines. They're saying, these are our states, those are your states. Now, the reason is they're not called the Northern Baptists. I just tell you that to separate that. They're called the American Baptists, okay? The American Baptists believe that all the states should cooperate together all Baptist churches should cooperate together and be inclusive that way. The Southern Baptists start to go, you run your side of the Mason-Dixon line, we'll run our side of the Mason-Dixon line. Okay? We're going to start to, they're being accused of pulling away and saying, these are Southern churches, those are Northern churches. Okay? We're different than you. Which you can probably think would happen, right? There was a war. Had there not been a war, there might not have been as much of an issue. But they're accused of being territorial. So, the American Baptists of the North would not recognize territorial claims of the Southern Baptists. The SBC was fine with money from the North to do mission work in the South, with the condition that the money first went to the convention and would then be dispersed into the mission field. Is that the way the Northern Baptists work? No. Their societies are separate from each other, okay? So with Southern Baptists today, we'll get to the cooperative program, but we have the cooperative program and the Southern Baptist Convention, which handles the International Mission Board, the North American Mission Board, the Lifeway. All of these are underneath the convention's umbrella. With the American Baptists, that's not how it works. They're all separate entities. Now, the churches give to those things. They give to these separate entities, but they don't, it's not that they don't work together or communicate. It's that one doesn't have any influence over the other, in a sense. Okay? So, the convention is taking in the money, saying, well, the money comes here. The North is funding churches by giving it to each individual church with the understanding that you're going to give it back to us. The convention is saying, you give the money to us, we'll disperse it to where it needs to go. Okay? So they're Baptists, they still want to help each other, they still work, but they have different ways that they want to do things. So the Southern Baptists in their meetings, and man, I did that twice. And the meetings in the North developed a territorial attitude, which the Northern Baptists saw as an attack on the unity of Baptists. So there starts to be territorial claims. There starts to want to, this is ours, that's yours. So this became evident when the SBC strengthened the Home Mission Board and began doing mission work only in the South and didn't encourage cooperation from the American Baptist Home Mission Society. So the Home Mission Board, here's one way to tell them apart. If it says society, it's Northern. If it says board, it's Southern. Okay? So the two groups that do the same work under different organizations, the American Baptist Home Mission Society and the Home Mission Board, now come head to head, because the Home Mission Board says, because economically the South is growing back, okay? So they're getting American currency. They're starting to use the same currency as the North. So they're growing economically. And they get to a point where they say, we can start to fund our own home missions. We're going to take, our churches are going to give money, and we're going to give that to the Indian territories. We're going to give that to money or to churches in the South. None of it's going north. Okay? So we're locking in the Mason-Dixon line, and below are our churches. Okay? Over the Mississippi River and Texas and going out west. So, let's take a break. Let's ask some questions. What do you think were the contributing factors to the SBC wanting to not realign with the American Baptists of the North? Yep, money. That's a big one. Financial control. Little bit of loser's regret, maybe. I mean, I think that's all going to play a part. We don't want to cooperate with you. You know. What do you think?
I think it's just hard for us to really realize how deep the hatreds and feelings, how strong those feelings were by the end of the war, and how each side treated each other.
Mm-hmm.
The economy of the South was ruined. Just the ability to make a living was ruined. It just was bad. And the North was beginning to get into an industrial revolution.
Right.
And there was a migration, a loss
Mm-hmm.
of people moving north. And
Right.
And a lot of it was the black community.
Mm-hmm.
So
They could get jobs. That's where the jobs are. There's no jobs in the South for them.
and they weren't going to stay down on the farm anymore.
No.
So,
They go work in the factories in New York and Chicago.
right. And so you had your economy played such a big role in both the cause and the Reconstruction.
Right.
And so you had so much that was divisive about the North and the South that carried on. And here you have it signaled in your, again, both sides thought they were on God's side.
Right.
And I'd hate to say it, but surely Baptists from the North didn't look to the Baptists on the South and said, our God's bigger than your God.
I don't ever get any of that, a sense of that going on.
But if you're on the South, we lost.
I think there was probably more of the God was on our side. He wasn't on yours.
Better say it. And so I think it was deep. We look back on it and think, well, why couldn't we figure this out? If you look at the Indian history that went on at that time, Trail of Tears and all that kind of stuff took place in the 1830s, 40s,
Mm-hmm.
and 50s. So you have large segments of Indian population, from the Seminoles, the Cherokees, the Choctaws, all coming across the Mississippi and getting planted in Oklahoma.
Right.
And all of these treaties they made with Andrew Jackson and some of those characters, they weren't being given supplies to even make a living with. And so you have disenfranchised populations, big populations. In Texas, guess what? We didn't help them against Mexico. That's 1830s, Alamo, and all that kind of stuff. They have to be their own state for a while. So all of that, they kind of aligned with the South. It was just overwhelming how we looked at one another. So yeah.
Right. There's a lot of that. I mean, it'd be hard to look at somebody and who a year ago, if you both had guns, would try to shoot each other.
Yeah.
And say, well, we're friends now.
And the South, the North, in my experience, the North really didn't want to know. I won't say they didn't care. They really didn't want to know what the South held dear. I can tell you,
Mm-hmm.
in 1950s, there were people in Iowa that thought the Indians still lived in teepees, all of
In the South?
them, in the South.
Oh.
They thought that. Now, let's think back. Television wasn't a big thing.
Right.
Indian culture and Indian wasn't being written about. The dime novels from the past history and all that kind of stuff were all played. How were they being portrayed in the movies, and what did they see?
Right.
They actually thought that the Indian population lived in teepees. So how could they even care?
Right, yeah.
How could they make that fit? Anyway.
All right, let's go on with this one. You're great. I love your input. Do you think that Southern Baptists were right to have an attitude of separation when it came to cooperation? I'm going to tell you, I think that probably because, like I said, those issues were not resolved. Okay, those same issues would have still happened, even if they had voted to say, okay, we want you to abolish the Southern Baptist Convention. Had they done it, let's say that they had voted, yeah, all right, we're done with the Southern Baptist Convention, there would have become a split again over the same issues of money that we're giving isn't coming back to us. It costs more to get to your society meetings than it does under one convention meeting. Those would have come back. Now, so which tells me that the real issue wasn't slavery, it was just one of many. Once that one got resolved, those other issues were still there and still would have contributed. So I think, yes, that it was right to say, because an organization can get too big, right? And if you're running churches, if you're part of a group that's thousands of churches, and it spans from Boston, Massachusetts, down to Florida, over to Texas, up to Chicago, and all of that area in between, it's too big. You can't maintain that. So those splits would have happened either way.
Wes, in order to kind of make this apply to what we're seeing now, do you think it's a fair statement that the North had much the same attitude as what we see happening in the Methodist Church now? The Methodist Church controlled its churches, it appointed its pastors, it assigned positions, it has its fingers much deeper into the individual church role.
So I would,
Autonomy is not
right.
the issue.
I would say that the North probably felt that they were more autonomous because they weren't a convention. But I think it was tactical for them to start funding and appointing pastors in the South. I think that was a tactical move to abolish the Southern Baptist Convention by making them less autonomous for a time, is what I think. I don't think like the way the Methodist Church runs is the way that they would have run. But I think the attitude of we're going to get rid of this thorn by putting our fingers in it and infecting them, and then we'll pull it back. So I think was probably, so what's really funny is at this point in time, church history books don't really cover this stuff. They cover Christianity as a whole, right? So most of what I'm getting to you is out of two books. One written from a Southern Baptist mindset and one written from a Northern Baptist mindset. And it's funny to hear their separate accounts of what happened and how they think the other side was doing the wrong. So, I mean, which is that I like to read those things anyway because I want both sides just to kind of see. So this is kind of a melting of those two. One last question. What might have happened if the two groups were to unite as American Baptists again? I think I already covered that. They would have split again. So that split would have come because it would have been too big. And maybe what you're talking about, them coming in, the churches probably would have lost some autonomy in that. So let's continue on. We're going to go into... I was hoping to have a little bit more time. We're going to go into the Baptist Sunday School Board because it plays a big part in what we do today. Because what is the Baptist Sunday School Board called today? Lifeway. It's Lifeway. Okay? Lifeway has had a few changes, but this is its origins. Okay? So we're going to talk about the Baptist Sunday School Board. Perhaps, this is a quote, "Perhaps no agency has done more to unify Southern Baptist people in heart and mind than the Sunday School Board. It helped turn them into Southern Baptists." So that's a quote from a man named Macbeth who's observing, and he says it's the Sunday School Board that really is what really caused Southern Baptists to become Southern Baptists. Okay, so after the split of 1845, publications were handled by the American Baptists of the North. So the American Baptist Publishing Society, which we talked about. Okay, they put out tracts, they did great things. And so that publication part, remember when the Southern Baptists split, it was for convention style. Okay? The Northern Baptists were participating in the Southern Baptist Convention. Those societies all came down to the meeting. It wasn't a split that we would say, that's your side, this is our side. That doesn't come until after the Civil War. When it happens, they're saying, as Southern Baptists, we're going to have a convention. We're going to support your programs, but your programs are going to report. You're going to come to us and report instead of us going to you. That became problematic for the North, for the American Baptists, okay? So but they still did it. So publication then is supported by Southern Baptists, and it goes into the American Baptist Publishing Society. So Northern Baptists still participated in the Southern Baptist Convention and still had influence among all Baptists. Remember, Southern Baptists split to form their own convention, but they remained Baptists. So all of that, they still are participating together. The split was mostly over money and how to direct that money to the home missions. I'm just going to be honest. I did the second part before I did the first part when I put it all together. So that's why I'm repeating myself. Okay? So the Civil War of 1861 to 1865 did not help bring did not help in bringing unity between the Northern and Southern Baptists. We already talked about all that. So, in 1889, two Southern Baptist men, one named Frost and one named Ticknor, I guess that's how you say that, Techner, met and discussed a literature board of the Southern Baptists. Now, I will say that Technor is more important than I'm going to make him out to be in these slides, because I don't want to give you name and dates. That's not my intent here. My intent is to give you what happened rather than who these people were. All the stuff that happened prior that we did in the last segment, he's a part of. he's kind of the president of the Southern Baptists, okay? But these two guys meet. Techner had been putting out some literature through the Home Mission Board with much success. So he's writing Southern Baptist stuff and getting it out through the Home Mission Board, okay? So they're putting out, because remember, you have people like Lottie Moon who are sending letters back. Where's she from? She's South. Okay, she's Southern Baptist. So they're taking that and they're putting these things out. They're putting stuff out there. They're writing articles. They can put together little magazines, but they don't have a publication society. So Frost put together a plan on how to make the new board work. So in 1889, Frost made the resolution to start the Board of Publication of Southern Baptist Convention. So at the convention meeting, we want to start this. There were strong objections to the resolution by the Northern Baptists and by Southerners who had more than their fill of mass publications. Have we been there? Oh my goodness. How many magazines did we give out? How many daily breads? How many of this? How many of that? Oh, we had the Baptist Messenger. We had all these publications that we're buying and paying and part of, coming into there, we're dispersing them. So they didn't want another one. And that's something else to fund, right? If we start this, that it requires money. So there's some objection that goes on, the Northern Baptists especially, and Southern Baptists, because remember, they're participating in the Southern Baptist Convention, okay? Southern money is going to these northern things. The SBC did, however, appoint a Sunday school committee with limited ability in publications. However, we did say, we're not going to do that, but there is a Sunday school committee that can put out some Sunday school literature. So that's what they started doing. The next year, in 1890, the issue was presented again. This time, the SBC appointed a committee, a person from each state, to investigate the matter. We want to start a publication board. Okay, every state, give us one representative. They'll have a meeting. They'll investigate. Do we need this? That committee appointed James Frost, who was the guy from before, who favored the motion, and J.B. Gambrell, who opposed the motion, to come to an agreement and write a report. So you two, you get together and you write a report on what's it going to cost, what's it going to take, should we do it, shouldn't we do it, kind of come to an agreement. Excuse me. So they agreed to say in the report that the board should be given fair consideration. That's what they agreed upon. Gambrell still opposed it. Frost still favored it. But they both agreed that one thing should happen. The Southern Baptist Convention should give it fair consideration.
That's better than unfair.
That's better than unfair. And it's better than no consideration at all, as we're going to see. You guys are going to love how this story turns out. This is one of my favorite stories. Okay, in 1891, the matter was brought up again. Many people came to express pros and cons of the new board. So we're 3 years into this now. They're still trying to get this board approved. So many people come. They've been talking about this for a few years. Now it's getting to the point where it's time to vote. the crowd was so large that the moderator had to be lifted through a window to get to the stage. That's how big this issue is. Okay, if we were doing it in here, it wouldn't have happened. There's no windows. Okay, but so that's how they had to get him in, window up by the pulpit, lifting him up outside, get him in the building because he can't walk through the door. Okay, the opposition called for a vote without discussion. So everybody's there to give their pros and cons, right? Gambrell is actually the guy. He stands up and he says, let's take the vote now. All right. Only 13 people voted against the issue. You're talking 1,000 people there. And only 13 opposed the issue and said, we don't want it. And it's reported that Gambrell sat down, put his face in his hands because he knew he'd just messed up. Because without discussion, he thought that crowd was there for him. And they weren't. They were there for Frost because they were Southern Baptists who were tired of Northern Baptist influence. How far away from Civil War are we now? Okay, we're 30 years. Okay, 25. But we're pushing 30 years away, and the Southern Baptists are getting tired of Northern Baptist influence. With that vote, the Baptist Sunday School Board was formed. We call it Lifeway today. The ABPS was not thrilled, so the American Baptist Publishing Society was not thrilled to have competition in the South, and the market for them started to dwindle. So less people are buying your magazines. Your publications just dropped, right? Because what is it about? Money. It's always about money, okay? So, I know that sounds very pessimistic of me, doesn't it? But it's always about money. Many in the South started to proclaim that the Northern publications were unbiblical in their theology. So this starts to come to head, starts to come to a fight, right? And so what do you start to do? Their publications are unbiblical. Buy ours. Ours are biblical. So they start putting them out. So the American Baptist Publishing Society began to combat the Baptist Sunday School Board by employing Southern pastors to promote their products, offer discounts that the Baptist Sunday School Board could not offer, and make grant money available to the SBC. So what are they doing? Buying readers, buying publications. Because remember, it's about advertisers. People advertise. People buy magazines. People buy these things. These things aren't free. They have to be bought. Okay, so they're losing money. But they're still a more powerful organization. Okay, they still have a lot more money than the Baptist Sunday School Board. So they start to do these things. They start to go out and tell the pastors, hey, push our products. Go tell your congregations about this. We want your church to buy our product, our letters, our things. Southern Baptist is going, but those things are unbiblical. You shouldn't buy those. Buy ours. Okay? In 1896, the Northern Baptists called for the disbanding of the BCSB, the Baptist Sunday School Board, at the convention meeting. The SBC kept it intact. So the Northern Baptists, American Baptists, they come down and they say, listen, get rid of this thing. Southern Baptists said, nope, we're keeping it. At the convention of 1897, a representative of Northern Baptists made an open attack on the Baptist Sunday School Board. It is not clear what the attack was. I couldn't find it. But Frost gave an account of the response of the attack and how Southern Baptists responded to it. This is what he said. I never saw so many heavy guns unlimbered so quickly to get ready for action. Meaning Southern Baptists pulled their pistols. They were pointing them at each other. So this is why this is one of my favorite stories. They resort to an attack. I don't know what it was. I would love to tell you. But one book doesn't even cover this. The other book just says they made an attack. I tried to Google it, find it, whatever. Don't know what it was. But the response was Southern Baptists pulled their guns. When I told this to Darian, she says, wow, we've been clinging to our guns for a long time, huh? We've been First Amendment for a long time. Like, yep. So that is what happened, and that right there is the split from Southern Baptists completely from any American Baptist influence in the Southern Baptist Convention at gunpoint. So here we go. What do you think of the fact that the final division and complete separation of Southern Baptists came at gunpoint?
It had to be something drastic.
It had to be something. I agree. It had to be something. I'm surprised that there's no account of it, that they don't say, well, it was some attack. Like, what did they do? Was it a verbal attack? It shouldn't be verbal in that sense. So everybody's like, oh, he just said that they're dumb. Shoot him. I mean, it had to be a physical attack of some kind. Like, I don't know, like they burned a building or something. I don't know. But at some point, some physical attack, some allegation, something caused everyone in that room to pull their guns. And they were ready to shoot. And we're 30 years after the Civil War. They're still ready to go. Okay? But, so what do you think? Sometimes it just...
Take something.
Yep.
There's going to be an issue that was going to force the total separation.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice to know we know what the issue was, but it'd be nice to know what was the trigger for that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll see if I'm going to keep digging on that because I'd like to know. I just couldn't find it in anything that I have. And that might be right there. They still remember that. So let's ask this. Why would a publication division be so instrumental in the final separation of Southern Baptists from American Baptists? Why is that a problem?
Well, it would be nice if we could say it was over doctrinal issues and stuff, but it was really over money.
It is. But publications is control. We're seeing this today. If you control the media, you control the narrative. Right? That's why the Constitution says for a free press, so that they can't be controlled. Unfortunately, we're seeing the opposite in that matter today. But if you control that, then you control the way people think. And keep in mind, the Southern Baptists, they're part of that Civil War. They lost. But they still believed that they were right. And even today, the stars and bars are still flown. Even today, even though it's not an official American flag that's commissioned by, the United States, there was still some pride in that. And there's differing ideas. Okay? And whether you want to say that they were wrong for slavery, which I will tell you, I believe that they were. Slavery is not something that God wants people to be in. He created us to be free. But there's other issues. You're talking about one part of the country that's trying to cripple the other part economically. That's a problem. And so a publication side is going to say, well, we want to separate from you. We want to pull away. And the American Baptists won't let them. They want to be Baptists. They want to have kind of the overarching, which I think comes from the Northern mindset. We don't want you to separate. We want to pull you in. We want to wrangle you in. We want to say that this is what happens to you. Okay? Now, our churches are autonomous, but there's always people that want some sort of power. Okay? So, publication, what people are reading, because that's what's in their day, that's what's going to influence people. Today, it would be, we want a separate Facebook account than you. We want to have our own Twitter handle, right? Well, you're separating from us. That's what we would be arguing over today if the same stuff were going on. But publications is where you can say, this is what Baptists believe. Because remember, what's happening, all of this is taking place while landmarkism is taking place. Okay, we covered landmarkism and what was going on there and how they were using publications to separate Baptists and pull Baptists apart. Okay, so
We're still 25 years old from, isn't it the New Hampshire Confession, which was the basis for the Baptist Faithful Message? I think it's 1925.
it was revised. It came out first in the 1700s. It was revised in the 1920s. The Baptist Faith and Message first comes out in 1925.
Okay.
So the New Hampshire one was ratified several times, but it came out in the 1700s.
So we have, well, I think the thing too, Wes, about that, even today, we've seen, even within Southern Baptist publications, we need you, Wes, to write a series on a particular scripture or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Our application of a scripture, whether you're teaching from an application standpoint or from a biblical based standpoint. We want you, but you're only going to be limited to 1,000 words. And I know that there would have to be some control in terms of, you can't print encyclopedia every time, but
Right.
the idea is more and more control is being administered. And even in this church, went from the Baptist publication of music in our choir programs and in our programs to a private publication of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
It was better in terms of the quality and the kind and what served us in this church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we see this is really getting to where it's rolling downhill fast.
Yeah.
Lifeway, to me, was a mistake, but that's just.
Well, it depends on. I don't think they can hear you. But so I mean, yeah, that's a discussion that we're going to get to because we're going to stay with Southern Baptist life. But now this is going to bring us into the 1900s. I will say that next week I'm going to take a detour. Okay, and I'm going to give you something else that's going to help us understand the 1900s. Okay, before we get into that. Okay, so next week will be. We're going to chase a big rabbit, okay? And we won't talk about Southern Baptist life. We're going to talk about something else that's going to help us look at Southern Baptist life and church life. So, all right. So that's how the Southern Baptist Convention finally pulls away, and that's how the influence of the Northern Baptists in Southern Baptist Convention ended. Let's pray, and then we'll be...
Two quick things.